Welcome to Chicago Style Parenting, where we delve into parenting life in Chicago and uncover the resources, information, and support that Chicago families need. I'm Amy Johnson, the Executive Director of Neighborhood Parents Network. Today, we'll be talking about AI in schools. Our guest today is Martin Moran, Head of Program for Middle and Upper School at Bennett Day School. Martin has presented at numerous conferences, sits on the board of South by Southwest EDU, and was recognized by the National Association of Independent Schools as a teacher of the future. Martin came on our podcast in our first season as well to discuss how to prepare kids for the age of AI. I am thrilled to build on that discussion today. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Amy. It's nice to be here.
It's nice to have you here. Well, I'm going to jump right in to our first question and ask what is the current feeling around AI in schools?
Thanks. That's a great question, and it's one that I think is obviously really important right now, but also one that I think a lot of schools are having trouble answering that question, frankly. So I think that really what AI has done, I don't think personally that AI has fundamentally changed things in school. I think it's simply highlighted some of the educational issues that have been bubbling under the surface for a very long time. The one thing about AI that's important to understand is that it's going to, because of its speed and because of its usefulness and because of those elements there, it's going to expose cracks in educational structures and setups. So really, ultimately, you've got this now existential challenge that exists for schools because of the speed and power of the technology. And what it's now doing is it's forcing schools to think about, what is our purpose? What are we doing? Why are we here? What does it mean to provide a truly human education for students in an era when some of the things that schools have been doing for 100 years are repeatable by a device of some kind, and is in no way making them obsolete, but has to force them to rethink, what is our why, and how do we do what we do. And I think in terms of what's changed about schools is not ultimately the I don't think the AI has forced schools to change dramatically in terms of like momentary, like, I have to do this right now. We can't possibly do this. It has to happen. We have to completely adjust our things and build around this technology. I think it's much more philosophical than that. I think it's much more built on the idea of, who are we, why are we, and what do we provide for children and adolescents to help them become the people we want them to become.
I thought that was really interesting. Part of our conversation when you and I were planning this podcast episode is I was thinking in the terms of the date AI is changing schools and the day-to-day, minute-by-minute work of schools. And you were really talking about how we approach educating children.
Yeah, I think that's such a big part of this because I for a long time I was in education. My official title was education technology director. So it was one of those things where when I took that role, I think within 6 months, my quick realization was, it's really not about technology. It's really not about technology itself. It's about, how does technology make us think about learning? And when we focus on the technology so much, it actually it really hurts the element of, when it hurts the element of schools that is really what makes them great. And I think it's the natural inclination when you hear about AI is to think about all the logistic elements. How do you take tests, and how do you write essays, and can kids use it surreptitiously, all of those things that kind of come into like the management of schools. But really, I think and it's not about the management of schools that has to change. It's about the like, what are we really doing within the context of our experience that hits on that learning element that is so essential to who we are. So it's hard because, I think parents and even some teachers and faculty and admins in certain schools are going to go there first, because that's where I think in some ways that's where the threat feels like it lives often. But in reality, I think that that it's something where this element of um, how we do what we do is actually, I feel like, is not horribly different from what libraries went through 10, 15, 20 years ago in terms of reevaluating their purpose and really understanding that. And I think you've got, libraries now, I think are some of the most wonderful places anywhere because of what they've done to become the almost cathedrals of knowledge, as opposed to places where you go to pick up a book or read a dictionary or check out an encyclopedia, right? And I think that's where education has to see this as like, how do we in this age of AI go back to making schools these cathedrals of knowledge and learning, and places that inspire, and aren't just places where you go to, you know write 3 essays and answer a couple multiple choice questions before you get your degree and move on.
Yeah. So, oh, probably some of the answer to this next question was in everything we just talked about, but
Mhm.
maybe you can lay it out really more simply for us. What is the primary concern schools and adults need to have as they engage with AI?
Yeah. I think there's a slightly different answer actually for schools and for adults. I think for schools, I talked a lot about that. Like, I think the primary concern schools need to have is, why do we exist, and what makes us important, because schools are one of the last places that are just, I think, are just um, one of the last great institutions in the world are schools, because they're a place where people come to engage with one another and learn from one another, and can hopefully feel as if they can be vulnerable. All of those things that I think are so missing from everywhere else in our world. Schools still have that. So I think the primary concern schools should have is, how do we keep that? How do we maintain that space? That's separate. That was what I was just talking about. I think with adults, I think the primary concern is, how do we not fear this in a way that will cause us to shirk the responsibility we have to guide young human beings through this world in this way? Because I think when, let's say, when laptops came out 5 years ago or whatever, when they were starting to make their way into schools, there were so many adults who were frankly intimidated by the technology, and felt like, oh well, my kid knows more about this than I do, so how, I really can't say no to them, or I can't guide them here, because they get it, and maybe that's where the world's going, maybe I should just give them that, and that's kind of how it should go. And that was probably the biggest mistake that adults over the last 25 years have made in regards to technology, have sort of have allowed themselves to be intimidated by technology. And I think that what adults can do now is start to say, okay, it's great. You as a child, you understand certain elements of this thing that helps people gain information. It doesn't mean that I should not play the role of parent, adult, mentor, teacher, all of those things, to help you guide yourself as a human being through this world. Because yeah, you might know how to run an effective AI chat through Claude, or be able to vibe code or whatever. That doesn't mean you understand all the things that go into what it means to learn with technology. It's For me, I think the concern parents need to have is, how do I continue to guide and mentor and lead my child through this without letting the technology force me to shirk my role and my duty as a parent, or a mentor, as an adult. And it's easy to do that, because it's this stuff is cool, and it's scary in some cases. It does it theoretically and seemingly does so many things, and it's so easy to be intimidated by that. And I think it's important for adults to respect that, but not say, because it can do this one thing, it can also do this other thing. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes adults make, is assuming mastery in one area implies mastery in all areas. I think that's we have to avoid that. And I think there are there are elements of this that are going to come out over the coming years in terms of how that plays out. And I think when we as adults um, take on that responsibility, the students and the children will come around to that. They'll push back. I mean, adolescents push back about literally everything. So it's not like it's something special with technology, but
Right.
it's they'll respect that boundary. And frankly, as a person who's worked in schools, especially over the last 18 months, they're blatantly asking for it in some cases. They're telling us we don't want to see AI in our schools, and and I think a parent who can step up and say, I can help you in this world, guide you through this, is going to be met with way more way more positive energy than they might expect.
Well, that's encouraging because it it takes it takes a lot of encouragement. I'm busy. I'm
Mhm.
trying to keep up with AI just to make my work life easy. I'm trying to be
Mhm.
responsible in my use or not use of it and to learn what the kids are doing and
Mhm. Mhm.
figure out how to guide my children through it when I am still struggling to um, interact or interact with it in the best way myself.
Mhm.
It's hard. Also, I'm tired of looking at a computer all day. In my free time,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to look at another computer. I don't want to send a personal email. I don't even want to pick up my phone and send a text. I do.
Mhm.
Now I have to add on um learning how my, kids learning how to guide my kids through AI. It feels very daunting. I feel like we could have a whole entire separate discussion on how to do that. And maybe we should.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll say this actually, one way to frame this, and
Mhm.
I get where that comes from. I hear that all the time is that, yeah, what's this? I gotta look at this new thing. What's this? Like, yeah, what random website or app do I know I never understand? What AI, like all of that stuff. I think that happens all the time. What
Yeah.
I think the primary concern when going back to that question, to simplify it, the primary concern adults need to have is how do I stay true to being that parent? Because the rules and the guidelines and the support I give my child, whether it's in an AI world or a non-AI world, are the same. And it's
Mhm.
not, just because you don't know how to vibe code with Claude doesn't mean you're not going to give that child guidance that they're going to need. The guidance that they're going to need pre AI is the guidance they need now. And it doesn't take knowledge in every single new technology that comes out every 45 seconds to understand what are your values and how do you instill those values in your child. And I think my um, my hope with parents when I talk to them individually um, is that the less they actually think about trying to keep up with all of the things and focus instead on what's the true north, the more they'll find that the true north applies regardless of the technology. That if I'm teaching my child to be a thinker, to be a learner, to be someone who is curious, to be someone who's kind and will connect with others and make and build a community, all of that is going to help them manage that world and is not going and that's not going away, and that's in terms of importance. So I guess my advice to you and to parents who are
Mhm.
feeling that is if you feel like you're always trying to keep up, step back and say, what is this for and what really matters? Because I'm telling you, as someone who's been in technology for 20 years now, um, the problem with isn't that the technology has done something to us. I think the problem is that the technology has allowed us to lose sight of some of the important values that make us human, and I think um, that's because we've been chasing as opposed to saying, nope, this is what it means to be human and to be a learner.
That's a comfort for me as a parent. I don't have to be up on all of the technology ins and outs. I need to just keep up parenting. Keep
Yep.
keep that
Yeah.
relationship with my child, keep the guidance of values of our
It's hard
values.
enough as it is.
Thank you to our partner, Macaroni Kid, Chicago North Side. All right, well, let's dive into something more specific.
Mhm.
with AI in schools, kids are doing their classwork in the classroom, or they're doing work at home, and some of them are, when they're appropriately or inappropriately, going to AI to help them with an assignment. What does an AI resilient assignment look like today?
Yeah, I think the when it comes to AI, and I'm going to lean a little bit. So there's a professor, an economics professor at Harvard named David Deming, who talks a lot about this. He talks about a lot about the AI, the role of AI in college, and it's actually it applies a lot to high school and middle school and lower school and even early childhood in some ways too. And where it comes from is this thinking about the idea of AI resilience being a demonstration of a person's ability to capacity to learn rather than um, rather than information recall, because information recall can and will be in students cases outsourced to AI. I don't think that's a good thing, by the way. That's not, I'm not saying, there are some people who are like, oh well, if computers can do it, they should. I don't necessarily believe that. I think there is important information that you should know. You should have knowledge. But we also know that kids, especially when you start to get into adolescence, and that frontal lobe is not fully formed, that they are going to take ways out of things that are the quickest way to finish something up. And so thinking about how can you provide students with the opportunity to have specific structured opportunity to think, assess, analyze, synthesize, and respond. It's really not. It's really about breaking down those steps and really having those checkpoints along those ways. So in other words, instead of simply saying, well, here's this assignment, read it, write three recall answers to the questions. That's not something that kids are going to understand the value of, and probably will be less likely to do it because of the um, um, sort of expediency issue, right?
Yeah.
But you have to figure out how to make sure that they're understanding those steps in learning. When you think about how do you have a question, build on that question, understand I need to know XY, I need to know what I don't know, and I also need to figure out what I don't even know that I don't know. Then I need to start to fill in those gaps. I need to analyze that material, and then I need to pull it together and then come up with a unique thought. All of those steps are slow and they're rigorous, but they are essential to the world in AI, because the I think, and maybe this kind of comes back to your first question a little bit. My biggest worry with schools is the emphasis on speed rather
Mm,
than rigor, and that they define rigor as how many things can you do in 3 days or a night versus like how deep do you think. And so I think that incorporating truly rigorous study is to walk through those steps with them and force them to have to be able to not only take those steps, but also articulate what they're doing during each step, because that's where they're learning how to learn, and thus being able to then when they're using AI in their job or later on, they're able to use it in an informed manner as opposed to a replacement for understanding. And then so I think that's a big piece, because um, when when students simply ask for the answer on a chat bot or whatever, and they get it, well, that's simple. That's really simple. I got it. I'm done.
yeah.
Versus um, having to actually think about how do I formulate questions that will support me in what I am trying to do, not how does this give me the answer that you told me I had to have. And so, because that sort of removes, essentially the kid becomes the middleman between the teacher and the AI in that case, right? If
Right.
I tell you,
Right.
yeah, if I tell you, all right, the assignment tonight is to give me a summary of the three most important battles of the Peloponnesian War, and the kid goes like, basically what I'm doing is I'm telling the AI to do that, but I just had a 15-year-old go do it for me. So how do you actually get them to have the type of thinking that goes into that learning piece? And I think um, that's probably the most important from a philosophical sense. I would also say from a very practical sense, this kind of goes back to what Deming was talking about in some of the stuff I've seen him talk about, is realistically in a world in which AI is so dominant, um, the verbal and oral presentation is probably the most effective approach to learning, bar none, anymore, because it's the one
Mm,
thing you can't fake. You can't, if you have to stand in front of a group of peers or a group of adults and talk about this and answer questions about this, that is um, ultimately the most AI proof thing you can possibly do. And at least right now it is. And I think, Deming talked about at Harvard, they're essentially he's predicting that they're going to move to almost all like oral exams one day, because that's just the best way to garner that information. I am kind of that opinion too, that realistically, in order for a student to in order for you to create truly AI resiliency, it has to be in person, and I have to look you in the eye.
that takes so long though.
I know. Well, that's the thing that goes back to the speed element, right? Is that because schools have been asked to do so many things, and it's like, here's the new add-on, here's the new add-on, here's the new add-on, and it's turned into this, like, well, we need to get through everything fast, and therefore, like, in order to get everything done, we have to go fast,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to sound counterintuitive to what we think of when we think of rigor, but rigor is doing less better. It's about taking the time to do those things that might take longer, but force a person to be able to work through the process, come up with the answer, and do the hard thing that is learning. And I think that's um, that's really where it comes from. And I think that's we've um, we have to we have to really get our sense of the word rigor back to what it really means, and understand that it's about depth and challenge, and not speed or quantity of facts remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of a class of 27 students all having to give 5-minute presentations,
Mm-hmm.
that can take a whole week to get
Oh yeah.
through,
Yeah.
and they're really gonna like, for a school to do this, they're really gonna have to take some things out of the curriculum,
Yeah.
and I guess really focus, do a little spring cleaning of their curriculum and figure out what's
Yeah.
most important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that that
It's
that's hard for a whole for a public school, for a large school district
Mhm.
to, like in Chicago, to get an entire school district on board. That sounds momentous.
It really, yeah, and yeah, I don't claim that this is a quick fix element. I
Yeah.
think though that there is no quick fix to this, but the
Mhm,
problem is the alternative is irrelevance. Unfortunately, the
mhm.
alternative is a, and I speak, when you think of the large public school district, or like, I feel like the problem with not doing it is that technology is continuing to chip away at those things that you did, that and that, so eventually it becomes you start to hear people who are like, well, why did I even go to school if all I'm going to do is recite the same facts that I can learn on, used to be,
Yeah,
learn on Google, now it's learn on, and I hate that argument, and I find it very anti-intellectual, but
yeah,
I also feel like we need to fight it, and sometimes fighting it's going to be having to look at what we do and figuring out how do we get back to that thing that inspires, and frankly, to be honest, I think inspired most people to go into teaching in the first place, frankly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so given all this information
Mhm.
information, um, eh, what There's a lot we want to teach students in the
Mhm,
age of AI, and some schools are going to be able to adapt faster to that than others, or even some individual teachers. But what skills do students need to have now in the age of AI?
mhm. I think the very first most important skill that a person who's in an AI world needs to have is metacognition, is the ability to understand how I think, how I like as a human being. So this is something where like I can actually start to identify. Oh yeah, I asked this question because let's take a 4 year old. Why did you ask this question? Well, I asked this question because last night we talked about this thing at dinner and it's interesting to me. And a student might be able to say that, and building off of that is really important because in the world of AI, one of the things that that is most important is asking informed questions
Hmm.
to AI. Is that and so you have to understand what goes into the questions that you ask it. And so like I think we've talked before about the joke that I saw that said something like when I ask AI about a topic that I don't know anything about, it's like 100% correct, it's perfect, everything is right. But if I ever ask it about something that I know a lot about, it's like 20% right. And it's like the and that's we need to understand that like as people get older, if they're going to effectively use AI, which is something that exists in the world, in order to effectively use it, we have to be able to program it, not have it program us. And we program it by being able to understand how to frame a question, how to ask a question, how to build a collection of knowledge that can exist that'll help me ask a good question. So like the idea that there are certain things I might need to know in order to ask AI a question about X, Y, or Z, because like, I taught history for 20 years. When I ask it a question about history, I can look at it and go, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I know that's not quite right. And so I can go back and reframe it. But if I'm asking it, about something I don't have any pre-existing knowledge of, I am way more likely to take its information and assume it applies beyond. So I think so helping students build that both ability to think metacognitively, but also then start to develop a knowledge base around certain topics. So understand that like um, you know, the reason why I can ask good history questions is because for 20 years, there's things that just have ended up in my long-term memory because I talked about them so many different times. So working with students on how to do that as well, and that's kind of an important part. Is that like the I'm this is I probably in the first half of this I came off as sort of like the sort of tech side. Oh, kids can look stuff up, but I don't mean that in the sense of they that lessons should be supplanted by AI in terms of like go find all the stuff about the Peloponnesian War. If something there is a set of knowledge that frankly kids need to know, and when we talk about schools in the age of AI, they do have to do some like I want you to take this information and turn it into long-term memory. Now, I don't mean you have to know what Pickett's charge is or you have to like specific facts, but the idea of being able to have a base of knowledge that I put into my brain so that when I go to ask questions later, I am now using AI as a tool and not simply as a replacement for my own thinking. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of like, I feel like that's a very philosophical answer to your question. But if I were to sort of put it down to the practical side, it's like the skill is how do I learn facts and knowledge and use that knowledge to ask informed questions.
Yeah.
That's what students need to be able to do, and that's when you think about moving through the K to 12 experience, I think that's really important.
Yeah. And we need that in other parts of our lives too.
Mm-hmm.
In school, in anything we're trying to learn, whether we're learning from a person or learning from a guide or a book
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah,
anything. So it's
that's the nice thing about this is that like AI has changed the stakes, but not the game.
Yeah.
and that like we those things are still incredibly important. It's just the stakes are higher now because they're more easily replaced.
Yeah, it's more than just learning how to write a prompt, which I see that all over my social media feeds now. These people who want me to follow them so they can teach me how to
Yeah,
write a good prompt, and that is surface level. What
yeah.
you're talking about is understanding how to ask questions based on what you know to help you know more. Um,
Hmm.
at least I think I paraphrased
No,
that.
you're absolutely right. Yeah, the yeah, that's speaking of conversations we could have. This technology has been out for 24 months. There's no such thing as an AI expert in learning. There's no such thing. It's been out 24 months. Nobody knows how to do this yet. And so like the idea of like follow me and I will tell you how AI works. It's 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 going to take way longer for us to wrap our heads around this.
Yeah,
So, but in the meantime, we still have to do the things that we know work.
yeah. And even just using that feedback and knowing if that was correct or not, just in personal conversation, someone's happy about something or worried about something or grieving about something, and I say this and it had the
Mhm.
unintended consequence, and being able to recognize that and change the approach next time or in the moment. I feel like
Mhm.
that's using a similar skill.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, um, you're self-assessing as you're doing this. And you're
Oh
taking your
yeah.
life experience to say like, yeah, how can you help me manage my way through this, as opposed to just do this for me.
Yeah.
That's those are two very different skill sets, experiences, and ways of navigating the world.
Okay, so how can parents help their kids manage life when AI is ubiquitous?
Yeah. So I think I would say two major things. First thing is for kids, especially like touch grass, get outside, be away from, like you were just saying, the exhaustion that with being on devices all the time. Get off of the devices as often as possible. There's nothing happening online that is going to that you can't find out later. So so
That's a good point.
um, so number one with a bullet for me is find other things to do and grow an appreciation for the physical world around you. That's number one, and that is I think by far the most important thing anyone from the I mean anyone, but especially anyone from the age of 3 through 18 can do is build an appreciation for the physical world and their human relationships. Most important. Um, Whether it's applied to learning or it's applied to just being a person, that being able to develop human relationships is essential. And so I would say that is easily number one. So as a parent, I would say encourage your child to go outside, to connect with their friends, to see them face to face, to talk to them, to have conflict with them, and to manage that conflict, and to learn how to negotiate those things. I know, I have friends who recently they have a young child, not young, but an elementary age child, and they got them what's called a tin can, which is like a old dumb phone that has no smart technology, and you have to actually call someone and speak to them, and I think stuff like that is great. Like anything that encourages the human interaction is probably the most important thing that a person can do, because these moments are so formative. And when someone grows up not having that human connection, it has, I think, pretty major consequences for when they're adults. That's number one. Number two, I would say is as often as possible as a parent, help your child start to identify their own thinking process. So when they do something, when they make something, when they build something, when they have an interaction, help them process that and have them verbally talk about oh, well, why did you do that? Tell me more about why you chose to build it that way, or why you chose to draw that picture. Tell me more about that. What was going on in your head? What type of things do you know now that you didn't know before you started doing this? Like what things are, um, what things are you learning as you're doing this? And those are simple conversations to have with a kid who is, kids are producing stuff all the time. They're always making stuff, always doing stuff.
Yep.
And it's so important for an adult to say, tell me why you were doing that. Because one, I would say first and foremost, it helps that student process the information that they learned and put it into long-term memory, like I was talking about. So from an academic educational standpoint, that's what's doing. Number two, and probably more importantly, your kid hears an adult in their life telling them that they're interested in them and what they do. And every child wants to hear that the adult cares about them and what they do. And so there is no downside to simply saying, tell me more about that. Tell me more about what was interesting about that. If you are curious about your child, that is probably one of the most important ways you will see that child grow as a human throughout the adolescence, even down to early childhood life. I mean, it's funny when we're talking about, when we talk about early childhood, you see that a lot in 3-year-old, 4-year-old parents who ask that, and then as they get older, we start to say, oh well, they don't want to talk to me, and yeah, that's true, but it doesn't never hurts to ask them, because the one the that kids always like talking about is themselves and what they're thinking, and the more you can get them to do that, the better they will be, both now emotionally and actually as learners too, because they'll be able to start doing that thing where they can say, I want to know more about this because I know this. And in the world where AI exists, you have to have that conversation with yourself in order to use that technology both effectively and ethically.
Yeah, and even if our teens don't answer our questions, we're still modeling the question. We can
Right.
keep asking them and then just let it
Exactly.
go if they don't answer, but we're still modeling the question.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, and that's, yeah, the hardest thing is that, you especially when you get into adolescence, you're going to feel like, man, I keep doing this and nothing happens. It's not going to happen now, but 2-3 years from now, yes, it will happen.
To remind myself of that all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Okay. So those things are doable.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
outside, appreciating the physical world, investing in the relationships around them, getting through hard conflicts with their peers or, other people in their lives. And then asking questions about their interest when they do create something. Why did you do that? Tell me
Mhm.
more about it. What made you interested in that? What did you learn from it? That's that seems really doable, and I wouldn't have thought of those as skills that would help them manage their AI
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. It's that's the one of the big challenges of technology is that, because it's so ubiquitous and hyped, when we hear how do you deal with technology, our initial reaction is to say, well, how do I manage this device or this thing? Like, so your focus goes onto the thing as opposed to, wait, no one says, like, how, no one ever said, how do you manage the world of pencils? That's, but in a lot of ways, technology is the same thing. It's like, it can be used to do those things, but you need someone who uses it the right way in order for it to be effective. And so in some ways it's simpler, and in some ways it's scarier, because of what we hear all the time on our own devices and
Yeah.
in our own feeds. But I don't know, like, as someone, like I said, who's I've been in education for 25 years. I've been an ed tech director. I've been a curriculum director. I've been in all of these roles. And what makes learning happen has not changed. It's 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 the same as it ever was. And we just need to make sure that we're doing the things that, promote that, despite the scariness of all these things that are showing up in our Instagram feed or our TikTok feed. That we just stay the course in a lot of ways, and don't have confidence in yourself, and have confidence in what you believe in, and at the same, and those things that'll carry a long way.
Yeah. This very this was a really uplifting conversation for something
Thanks.
that seems very tech related. It's really more human related. And
Mhm.
AI is just a tool, and we can manage it the way we've managed other things, and we can help our kids. And the way to do that is to keep on the solid parenting that most of us are already doing. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and if
yeah,
we can do that, it doesn't mean it's not hard. It just means
yeah.
that it's it's not new, but like it's challenging, and it's parenting is an incredibly um, challenging and hard thing to do, but luckily it's you just have to do those things that are hard. They're not new things. They're things that have always been hard. And
Yeah.
and if you can do those, yeah. So it should, yeah. I'm glad to hear that it's uplifting because it should be, but it doesn't. It certainly doesn't minimize the challenge.
No, no.
Yeah.
But I'm inspired because it seems surmountable.
Yeah. Yes, it
Seems like
is.
we
I
can do
think.
it.
I think. Yeah. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Martin. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot from it. I think our listeners will too. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing these both philosophical and practical points about AI in schools today and parenting with it and around it, and um, just being our parenting selves. So thank you for that.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about it.
It's always nice to talk to you.
Thanks.
Um, Listeners, we really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Check out our show notes for a link to learn more about Bennett Day School and anything else that we talked about. You can also, in our show notes, tell us what else you'd like to hear about and who you'd like to hear from by completing a quick form. Hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop, and we'll see you around the neighborhood.